T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. It is time for week 12 of Out of the Tunnel. We have an exciting show for you, even though it's not really the most exciting day in college football. You know, ESPN's trying their hardest to make it, calling it Statement Saturday, which is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't call it a statement when Tennessee blows out South Carolina 56-0, but hey, here we are. You got to try and spice up some of these matchups somehow. But still, either way, it's going to be a fun day of college football, and we are here to get you guys ready for it with week 12 of Out of the Tunnel. So without further ado, Nick, let's go ahead and dive into today's show.
Yes, sir. So, looking for something different, that we haven't talked about. So, I want to know from you guys if you could pick one underdog of the year, either someone that has outperformed their expectations or just has shown up against big teams all season. Who would that be? I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way because I took the easy one. I went with Kansas. Obviously, a team that went from 1 to 2 wins every season to bowl eligibility. And really had the chance to be in a lot of good games or to win a lot of good games this year that they ended up losing. So, like I said, I went with Kansas. Go ahead. Let's start with George because I feel like I usually start with Slade.
Yeah. I'm actually going with UConn this year. I mean, a super surprising team. They beat or they had one win last season. It was against an FCS, the Yale team. So a terrible 2021 season. Their head coach, Randy Edsall, had retired suddenly, right at the beginning of the season. They had an interim coach all year. Jim Mora was the offensive assistant. He gets promoted to head coach at the end of the season. He previously coached at UCLA from 2012 to 2017, had done nothing with college football until last season. He had done a few TV shows here and there, analyst wise and such. But he gets hired at the beginning of this season. His record at UCLA was 46-30. So not terrible, but not the greatest, especially his last 2 years there. I don't think they got above 4 wins. Um, but he gets promoted, and now you're looking at a UConn team that has 6 wins. 5 of them are FBS schools, and they play Army today. If they beat Army, they're 100% guaranteed to go to a bowl game. Right now, they are technically bowl eligible, but with them being an independent team, that it was announced by the bowl committee last week. We got to wait and see where everything shakes out and so on. But if they win today, they absolutely lock up a bowl spot, which would be huge for that program. And I'm super excited. I think they're going to do it. They play a lowly Army team right now, and I think they do it. And I think we're going to see UConn at a bowl at the end of the season.
Woohoo!
Yes, so I went with Wake. I think that the Sam Hartman factor has changed everything for this team this season. I think that right now they sit at like 6-4, just needing to kind of win out for a bowl to make the bowl. I don't think this team would have been, I don't know, a 3-win team without Sam Hartman this season, just based on their schedule. So that was the reason why I think that I went with Wake, and I think that they were handed a golden opportunity when they allowed him to be eligible to play this season. I don't know what changed health wise, because a lot of times when they say that you're going to need to be out for health reasons, that's the reason, and you're going to be out. But there's see, and he's really up this season. I mean, he's thrown over 25 touchdowns this season, and I think he's only got like 5 interceptions. So really, really great to see from him. And
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. No, nonetheless, I mean, it's great to see him back and playing healthy. Let's go ahead and let's look over at Slade's headline. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia football today. Maybe.
yeah, so the main thing here is that I don't think that Georgia is capable of playing in the dark. Um, they have only played, I think, 3 games this year at 7 or 7:30, and those games, I mean, we saw their first 7:30 game of the season was against, I think, Missouri, and that was the game that they were losing until 4 minutes left in the game. I wonder from you guys if you think that Georgia is gonna find trouble in the playoffs, seeing as though, they're probably going to be playing at 7:30. Do you think that this is gonna cause trouble for them and have to, like, catch up, or do you think they're gonna be okay? I mean, of the upper teams, nobody has played more like, primetime games than TCU, who's played 4. Um, Now TCU does have 2 of them against ranked teams, 2 of them against Joe Schmo teams, but, Texas and Kansas State are who they play in prime time, and they were able to get the win against both of them, so I'm just wondering from you guys if you think Georgia will have any trouble playing prime time, or if you think they're gonna be okay. George, we'll start with you.
I'm gonna say no. I don't think the time makes a difference. The other night game they played Mississippi State and they throttled them 45-19. I mean, listen, a lot of these schools they can put input in when hey, we want to play at night, we want to play at noon. I mean, we saw last week Michigan complaining about having to play all these night games and so on. I don't think Georgia
Even
really
though they had
cares.
5 big noon games in a row, but yeah, continue.
Yeah. But I mean, the, the,
And
the
Michigan has only
concerns
played 3
Michigan
games.
had the concern Michigan had about playing night games is very valid. You don't want people there getting drunk all day, and then you play a game at 7-8 o'clock at night. That doesn't get over until 10-11 o'clock at night, and then you're worried about those people going and driving home. So I mean, while it does sound very whiny coming from Michigan, they were valid concerns. But as far as Georgia goes, yeah, they've only played 2 night games this year, and one of them was really close against a bad Missouri team. Um, I think they're gonna be more than fine. This is more a TV contract thing. This is CBS's last year with the SEC. Listen, we have the number 1 team in the country. They won the national championship last year. They wanna get that team on CBS as much as they can. ESPN just couldn't find slots to stick them at 9 o'clock, or excuse me, at 7 o'clock. And granted, they didn't have a lot of very good games to even stick there. Um, you know, CBS got the Florida and the Tennessee game. They also have the Kentucky game this week. Um, and so you're left with you're looking at teams Auburn, Vanderbilt, um, South Carolina, and so on. And those are games that, like, yeah, we could put Georgia at night, but nobody's going to watch this at night. They're going to go want to go watch other matchups and so on. So I don't think the time difference is that big of a deal. And I think Georgia will be fine come playoff time.
Yeah, I did just want to take a quick second to say, so obviously, like the logistics of everything, makes sense. I do find it kind of strange that last year's national championship winners don't get one primetime game. But again, TV contracts and whatnot. As far as any effect that it might have, I mean, I guess to an extent, like it could, depending on what kind of environment you're playing in. The 2 games that they did play late, were they both at home?
No, they're all on the road.
Were they okay? I couldn't remember the Mizzou game. I thought was at home, but obviously I was wrong. So anyway, yeah. So uh, the 2 games that they played were away, and I don't think that any time matters as far as playing in Georgia. So at least the 2 games they got in prime time were on the road. They got to experience that, even though they might not have been the craziest crowds in college football. But yeah, when it comes to playoff time, especially you look at like Stetson Bennett and some of the other players that have been there, from last year that stayed, and obviously the coach. They know what they're doing. They've kind of prepared for it. So I think that it could be possibly something to watch out for, especially when you get in that rhythm of playing at a certain time and then you got to switch that up and play at a different time. You know, could mess up the routine and everything, but I don't think that it's going to be a huge deal come playoff time.
I'll just say this before Slade gives his input. Now, the national championship game, obviously will be a late night game, 8 or 7 o'clock. I know they announced the time, but I can't remember what it was now. But more than likely, usually if Georgia stays number 1, they number 1 team can't pick, but they can give their input like, hey, we would rather play here, and they can't really give their times and so on. That's up to the scheduling committee. But the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl are the semifinal games. One of those is played on the West Coast. That would more than likely take the later slot. So if Georgia gives like a little nudge saying, hey, like put us in the Peach Bowl, again, that has to be approved and so on. And it's not they can't pick it per se. But I mean, you end up getting the Peach Bowl. You're looking at a 4 o'clock start time. So I don't think it'll matter for the semifinal if that were the case, but again, I don't think the time matters. I just think they had one bad game against Mizzou, and other than that, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kinda more or less upset that we've got the top 4 teams in the nation and only one of them. I mean, I'll put Ohio State in there, and I'll say 2 because they played, Notre Dame and Toledo at home at 7 or 7:30. Um, so aside from OSU and TCU, of, like, the top 5 teams, I think that the spread for them, the other teams going against, a team at 7 or 7:30, it is probably, like, I don't know, 22 points based on the competition that these teams are playing, like, that's where I'm confused with the TV deals and time slots and stuff like that, like, why was Kentucky not a 7 o'clock game? Why is Tennessee, we saw that, not a 7 o'clock game? There was so many opportunities when the SEC games for them to play prime time, be the primetime game that's on, like, I don't know, I just and I understand that Kirby Smart had come out and said that he prefers to play at 3 o'clock. He said that if they play at 12 o'clock, there's too much going on in the beginning of the day for them to get all their steps in, uh, from a coaching standpoint, from getting the players there. I mean, they do the practice and stuff the night before, and then they've gotta be over at the stadium at, like, 8 o'clock as a player, to be able to play at noon, whereas if it's a 3:30 game, they don't have to be over there till, like, 10 o'clock. If it's a 7:30 game, he said that they basically wait around all day to play. Um, I guess it's just, like, I wanna see, like, the big games at 7:30, and it seems like these teams are trying to do the exact opposite,
I
or at
mean, yeah,
least
I would like to
the
see big
broadcasting
games at
companies are
7:30
doing it.
too. Yeah,
It seems
but
like
I'm just saying
noon has
again,
seen the best of the hard games this season.
yeah. But I mean, I agree with you. I would love to see some of these matchups at primetime and stuff. But again, I feel like they've only had two big matchups, one on kickoff weekend and then the Tennessee game. I mean, again, back to the Tennessee game. ESPN can't control that because that's CBS's deal, and CBS doesn't broadcast night games. So I mean, I understand that one. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, again, these schools get input on, hey, we like to play here or there at these times. Um, and granted, Georgia's two away games you could look at and say, they weren't really tough matchups with Mississippi State and Mizzou. But a lot of these schools, I feel like, are like out of the top four, only one team it has a quality schedule to me, and that's TCU. And they get a lot of night games because hey, this is when we can get put on TV more with Fox and other ESPN games and so on. So, I mean, it's great for them to play night games, but I'm sure at the same time, Sonny Dykes is sitting there going, now we got to sit in our hotel room for 6 hours during the day and do nothing. So, I mean, I understand it's a double edged sword. I mean, you think about it, 30 years ago, we probably weren't even having night games. I mean, this wasn't a discussion. So, I mean, it's just the way it goes with TV deals and stuff, especially. So, let's go ahead and we're gonna take a look at some conference championship races. We have already had two of the Power Five conference title games announced. It'll be in the ACC, UNC versus Clemson here in Charlotte, and in the SEC, it is Georgia versus LSU in Atlanta. So three of the other conferences are still up for grabs as far as who's going to play in the conference championship game. So we're going to look at the Big 10, Big 12, and the Pac 12, and just look at all the scenarios and who needs to do what to clinch. So first up, we're going to look here at the Big 10. In the East, it's pretty simple. Michigan versus Ohio State next weekend. Whoever wins goes to the Big 10 championship game. That is pretty straightforward. Even if one of them loses this week, they still have a chance to clinch and go on to the Big 10 championship game. Now you look at the West, year in, year out, we always talk about the Big Ten West and just how crazy it is and the nightmare scenarios. Up until last week, there was still a possibility for all seven teams to tie for the Big Ten West, and Northwestern could get on in the tiebreaker technically. So we're going to go ahead and look at this and just discuss on who we think is going to make the conference championship games. So first up, you have Purdue, who's technically leading the way right now. They have a tiebreaker over Illinois and Minnesota. Illinois is in second place because of that tiebreaker. They have a win over Minnesota and Iowa. Iowa's in third with a win over Purdue. And then Minnesota is in fourth right now just due to tiebreakers. They don't have a win over anybody ahead of them here. They do play Iowa today. If they could pick up a win, obviously they would have a tiebreaker there. That would also eliminate Iowa, though, I believe, from the Big Ten West contention. So, Slade, I'll go with you first. Just who do you think is going to come out of the West and just your pick, I guess, generally for the East.
Yeah, so I'm going with Purdue, solely based on schedule. I mean, Illinois plays Michigan today. Minnesota will have to play, I believe, Wisconsin next week. Not to say that they're like this big powerhouse, but just based on schedule, I mean, Purdue plays. Uh, who did they play today?
They played
Um,
Northwestern and Indiana.
yeah, so I mean, I feel like they have the simpler schedule of the three. Nobody has like a really like over the top tough schedule, but Illinois does have Michigan this week, so I think they're completely out of it. And then I'm gonna go with OSU. I mean, I think that it's just gonna be hard to beat them this season. I think that they're able to play when it comes time to tougher competition, and I think we're gonna see that next week.
Nick, your picks for the Big Ten?
Yeah, so I gotta agree with Slade on the West. I think that Purdue, with the schedule that they have coming up the next 2 weeks, plus the tiebreakers that they already have, I think in my opinion, I think they're in control of the Big Ten West, or at least in control of their own destiny in the Big Ten West. And as far as the East goes, I did originally say OSU, but I thought about it, slept on it some last night. And I just, if Michigan can run the game that they want to run against OSU, it's not going to matter who they're playing against. I mean, obviously, like, I think a Georgia defense, would be a great matchup against Michigan. But as far as OSU's defense, if Michigan can run the ball, pass it when they have to, I think Michigan has a good shot at winning this game, and taking themselves to the Big Ten championship. So I got to go with Michigan and Purdue.
Yeah, I think the Michigan Ohio State game next week is going to surpass the Alabama Tennessee game for game of the year in my eyes. I think it's going to remind me a lot of the 2006 game between those two when they're both ranked 1 and 2. Mike Hart, Chad Henne went in there and they played Troy Smith and just an instant classic game. Wow.
Sorry.
Just
You're just
an instant classic game. And I think this game is going to be our generation's, 2006 Michigan Ohio State game. I'm not going to pick a winner right now. I'm going to save that for next week. I got to think on it for another week.
Oh,
As far as
come
the West,
on. It was your topic.
I'll take Ohio State for now. As far as the West, I'm actually going to go with Iowa. One, just to be a little bit different, but two, they have found a way to show up in these big games, especially in the West, not the East. They got blown out by Michigan and Ohio State. I'm not saying that, but whenever they play their West opponents, especially Purdue, I believe it was just 2 weeks ago, they showed up and they just ran all over Purdue. Aiden O'Connell could not move the ball against them. I think matchup wise, Purdue versus anybody, or whoever wins the East, is going to be the best matchup for the Big Ten championship game. I have a feeling Iowa, pulls out a win against Minnesota today. I'm picking Minnesota in that game, but I don't know. I just feel like Iowa just kind of has this momentum behind them, and they find a way to win these dumb games by only scoring 4 points. And they're going to hold Minnesota to a field goal. But I think if they win this week, they play Nebraska next week. And if they can, beat Nebraska, I believe they're at home against Nebraska, so that makes it even more difficult for the Huskers. You're looking at a tie between Purdue and Iowa, and then as we see here, Iowa gets a tiebreaker over Purdue. Just the Big Ten West has a way of always just giving us these weird results at the end of the season, and I think that's what's going to happen this year. And Iowa's going to end up in the Big Ten championship game and only score like 4 points again or something like that. Let's
Made
go ahead.
history.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's look at the Big 12. Little less drama here, but it's still very much up for grabs. TCU is locked into the Big 12 championship game in 2 weeks in Dallas. The 4 teams chasing them are Kansas State, who has a slight advantage over everybody. They are at 5-2. They have tiebreakers over Baylor and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State sits at 4-3, just a game behind. They have tiebreakers over Texas and Baylor. Baylor is still in the mix at 4-3, except they don't have a tiebreaker over anybody. They do play TCU today, and that'll be a big matchup for them. And then you have Texas at 4-3, who's somehow still not dead. So Slade likes to hear that, but they do have a tiebreaker over Kansas State, where Kansas State were to lose this week or next week, and Texas is sitting right there with a tiebreaker over them. So Nick, we'll go to you first this time. Who do you think is playing TCU in Dallas?
Yeah, so I'm going with K-State on this one. I think that they have I don't want to say easy, road to finishing, or not finishing the season undefeated, but winning out. But I think they have a favorable one. How, in my opinion, the only real big concern I have is that Texas team. If they win two more games and K State happens to drop one, obviously they have a tiebreaker. Um, K State has that tiebreaker over Baylor and OK State, so they can lose a game in these next two games and still be okay as long as Texas happens to lose one also. So Texas is definitely sitting back there, but I'm going with K State at the moment.
Slade, why are you picking Texas?
I'm picking Texas because I think that K-State's gonna lose to Kansas next week. I think that Texas is going to beat them this week, and so I think that they're gonna give themselves that opportunity. They're gonna go and they're gonna beat Kansas this week, and then they're gonna go to Baylor next week. And let me see real quick. Next week they play Baylor at noon, so they're gonna go in and they're gonna win, and all the pressure is gonna be on K-State for their 3:30 game or 4 o'clock, whatever they end up playing, and, they're gonna end up getting it done, and I'm gonna book you an appointment.
All right. Um,
And they
I'm
still
gonna
have
go
to
with
win the championship game.
yeah.
I mean, you guys modified it. I said
I
that they're
did
gonna
not
make the
modify it.
conference championship game, and then originally it went to they were gonna make the playoff 4, and then, like
The
but
No,
official
from the
tweet
start.
was if Texas
From the
wins
start, I said if Texas wins the conference championship, and then you said they got to make the conference championship, and I said no, it's already tweeted.
Right,
So,
I originally said they had to make it, but you tweeted that they had to win, so but it's
it,
okay, it's okay,
maybe
they're gonna
they
get revenge on
making it
TCU.
ain't nothing though. Purdue might make the Big Ten championship,
You
and then they're
guys
going to
thought
get
it was
smothered.
crazy that they were gonna make it. Let's just put it that way.
yeah. Well, when they lose this week and next week, I don't want to hear you complain. Kansas State, I'm going to go with them as well. I think it sets up a great rematch. You're talking about a team that had a 10-point lead on TCU earlier in the season, and their starting quarterback got knocked out at the beginning of the game, and they kind of struggled late and fell apart. The Big 12 has this circle of life every season where they get a really good team who's on the verge of making the playoffs. They get to the Big 12 championship game, and just something dumb happens in that game. Last year, you had Spencer Sanders throw 4 interceptions against Baylor. They came back and they lost on a last second play, get shoved out at the one. I think Kansas State finds a way to get back in there, and they get revenge on TCU, and they continue the Big 12 streak of not having a team in the playoffs. I think that's just kind of the self parry that the Big 12 has. And I can see it rearing its head this year. On the other hand, I'm looking at Baylor too. This is a matchup with TCU year in and year out. These two produce the best games. Again, you look at matchups where a team has a chance to get to the playoff or a New Year's Six bowl or something, and these two play each other, and then the underdog wins, and it's completely surprising. These two teams do not like each other. It is a hidden rivalry. I feel like inside of the Big 12. So my two picks would be Kansas State or Baylor. Again, I think Baylor can pick up 2 huge wins, and then you're looking again at a TCU Baylor rematch in a few weeks. But for right now, I'm going to go with Kansas State just because they have a little bit easier path. They play West Virginia, and they do have a rivalry game against Kansas. Kansas is going to be coming off a big Texas win, and so it's going to be an interesting matchup next week. And now we're going to look at the Pac-12 and what I think can be the ultimate chaos scenario. Right now, you have USC at 7-1, who has a tiebreaker over nobody. So if for some reason they lose today, and they're sitting at 7-2. Let's say Utah wins today, but they lose next week. They're sitting at 7-2. Oregon, if they lose or win this week, and then they win or lose next week, they're also sitting at 7-2. You could have UCLA sitting at 7-2. You have Washington sitting at 7-2. There's a possibility of a 5-way tie here, and I think it's absolutely beautiful, but absolutely chaotic as well. So Nick, let's get your picks first on who you think is going to be playing in Las Vegas in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I went with UCLA and Oregon. I think they both have favorable schedules to end the season. Obviously, it's going to take a slight USC collapse, but I do think that starts today against UCLA. So that's the main reason I ended up going with them. And as far as Oregon, I think they turn things around here, and I don't want to say turn things around because it makes it sound like the whole season was shit. I forgot about the swear jar. I'm on like zero sleep. But yeah, I just think that Oregon is probably the most comfortable I am picking a team here. UCLA I know is a bit of a reach with the way things sit right now, but I like their chances. Like I said, I like their chances today, which obviously will help get them one game closer. So we'll see.
Slade, your picks?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's crazy, like you said. I think UCLA possibly having Utah, Washington, and USC as their tiebreaker games after this week would be something. But just based on schedule, I think that USC is going to be able to get it done today, and I think they're going to be able to get it done against Notre Dame next week. So I think it's going to be USC, and then unfortunately, Oregon has to go up against these beautiful uniforms that the Utes are rolling out today, and so I think that the spread is pretty correct. I think they're gonna get, like, a two-point win, which is a good game. We'll see another good game. So I'm going with Utah and USC in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think more than likely that's what's going to happen. I mean, UCLA has found a way to win these games at home, so they can absolutely beat USC today. I don't think that's a sealed game one way or the other. It's going to be a half empty stadium because UCLA fans don't show up and USC fans are too dumb to realize it's just across the other side of the city. And so it's going to be pretty quiet, which UCLA likes. They don't like loud environments. Um, and we've seen that when they beat both Utah and Washington at home. And so I think UCLA absolutely has a chance to upset USC today. And then you're looking at a possible Utah UCLA or Utah Oregon rematch. Um, Washington is just sitting there waiting in the wings, especially after the big win last week. If Oregon drops another again, if this scenario of all five teams possibly tying is just going to be absolutely ridiculous to watch, and I'm excited to see what can happen and just the math that'll need to go into it. Um, and so for me, though, I'm going to go with USC Utah as well. I think we get another rematch, two South teams. I will say I don't 100% agree with the way that the Pac-12 has done this, the championship, kind of going to the Big 12 style of, hey, we're just going to take the two best teams. On one hand, I respect it, but the other hand, I mean, you get things like this, and you have teams like USC who have played one quality opponent up to this point. They're going to play UCLA today, and you're sitting here at 7-1 with no tiebreakers over this. I mean, if they were to lose today, you're talking about a possible top 10 ranked team still not going to be in your conference championship game. So it's cool on paper until you get into a scenario like this, and you're looking at that possibility of a top 10 team missing your conference championship game. Um, but that will do it for my topic today. We are going to go ahead and move over. We're going to look at upset alerts and get that going for you today. A lot of teams I feel like are possibly on upset alert. Nick, go ahead and give us yours first.
Yeah, so kind of like I just talked about, I ended up going with USC from an upset alert this week. I think this is a very winnable game for UCLA at home. I think UCLA is the more proven team. They face some better opposition. They have some wins that they can, kind of show off and say, yeah, we did this. USC really doesn't have that. And again, USC fans could show up to this game, but like you said, they're more than likely not going to. Um, so it's going to be exactly what UCLA wants in home. They're looking to play spoiler, with USC sitting right outside playoffs. So yeah, I really like UCLA's chances this week.
Slade, who's your pick for upset alert?
I'm going with more simpler, non-chaotic, no problems whether this game goes one way or the other. I'm going Pitt. They're 7-point favorites against Duke today. I don't think that's a reasonable line. I think that it should be more like 2 points, but um, I don't know. I think Duke's going to be able to get it done today.
Yeah. I've said this from the beginning of the season. I've stood by this, and even when Maryland got blown out 30-0 last week, I'm still standing by this. I'm going to go with Ohio State traveling all the way to Maryland. Again, I don't think this is because Maryland's a tough environment or anything like that. I think this is more so because of the simple fact that Ohio State is looking at next weekend and what next weekend is going to be, which is a game to get into the playoffs, unless Purdue or Iowa or somebody can do something crazy in the Big Ten championship game, which I don't think whoever makes it there out of Michigan, Ohio State is going to take their eyes off of that prize. They understand this is the only thing standing between me and the playoffs. But right now, I think Ohio State is looking ahead. I think Michigan is going to struggle a lot with Illinois today for the same exact reason. But the main reason I picked the Ohio State game over the Michigan game is just because of I can't get 2018 out of my mind when Maryland had Ohio State dead to rights. They should have won that game absolutely. They fell apart late in the fourth quarter. Ohio State takes that to overtime, and then they end up winning 52-51 because Maryland couldn't catch the 2-point conversion. So I 100% think Maryland can keep this game closer today than what the experts are picking. I think the spread is 22 right now, and so I think Maryland keeps it close. Maybe they even get a lead early in the game. I'm not saying Ohio State loses this outright, but I think Maryland definitely gives them a scare here. And I think they're just looking ahead. Both teams are looking ahead to next week. Illinois is going to keep it close with Michigan today, and I think Maryland does the same with Ohio State. Before we get into our cash out picks, we're going to go ahead and update you guys with the college football top 25. Not a lot of change after last week. We had Alabama beating Ole Miss, so they slide down the charts. Oregon, who was number 6, loses to Washington. They drop to number 12. We talked at length about this on Thursday on the podcast. So if you want to see a more in-depth breakdown of that, head over there and check that out. The one thing I didn't get to say on Thursday that I want to say now is I think absolutely Coastal Carolina should be ranked right now. They're sitting at 9-1. Actually, they're sitting at 9-1. They're not going to play this week. They're supposed to play Virginia. Obviously, that game has been canceled. But I think Coastal Carolina absolutely deserves to be ranked. Their one loss was a conference loss at home, and I think they're not getting it. We see it and say it every year. The Group of 5 teams just don't get a lot of respect. I feel like the American Conference has almost been adopted as a Power 6 conference. With Cincinnati making the playoff last year, they have 3 teams ranked in the top 25 right now. If you look ahead to next week, Tulane has already won this week. They beat SMU. That sets up a matchup with them in Cincinnati. The winner will play UCF in the conference title game. So that brings a lot of excitement to that game next week. But just any quick thoughts on the top 25 before we move into our cash out picks?
I did forget to say on Thursday, and this is more of a, like, just based off of what I've seen kind of thing. I don't feel like Utah is a top 10 team. I don't even know if I'd say they're a top 15 team. I think that they can be. I think they have the potential to be the team that we talked about preseason, where they could make a run this year. But they just haven't been that consistent, especially Cam Rising. I don't feel like when I see that. You talked about Penn State on Thursday. Utah gave me that feeling. I don't feel like they deserve to be there. But then again, when I sit here and look at this list, I'm like, well, who does? So it is what it is.
For those
Slade?
exact reasons, they should not rank outside the top 10.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we're not getting started again. Go watch the show on Thursday if you want to hear Slade talk about it.
All right.
All of us talk about it, really.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. Let's look at our cash out picks. Nick, who do you got this week?
Let
I'm
me
sorry.
refresh
Standings first.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna look at the cash out picks. Nick still is just whooping us. Game picks though. Slade and I are still tied, and Nick is now only 4 games back with 2 weeks really, or 2 weeks really, or 3 weeks I guess because you're not counting this week yet. Of picks, so it's getting tight at the top. So it's gonna be a lot of fun the next 3 weeks. All right, now Nick, who are you taking this week?
All right, so I seen that you picked 3, and I know that Slade picked 3 earlier in the season, so I figured I would go ahead and also pick 3. So first up, I went Kansas plus 9.5. I'm not gonna lie, the majority of that is out of spite, but I also feel like they can cover that. Up next, I have Northwestern plus 17.5 at Purdue. I get that Northwestern is not that good of a team, and I get that Purdue is looking for to make the Big Ten title game. However, Northwestern has kind of been sneaky, has kind of hung around. You think about the Penn State game, yeah, it was bad weather, whatever. There was another game this year that they had no business being in, but they kind of hung around early. And Purdue is a team that we've seen, they've played great sometimes and they've played iffy sometimes. And I think, Northwestern just kind of has a way of making people play down to their level. And I think they end up covering that 17.5 points. And then last but not least, I'd done it so much this season, and it is a historical day in the over-under community. This is the lowest over-under in college football history, so I had to take the under. Why not be a part of history? Let's go, baby.
This is the second time this year Iowa has broken the over-under record.
Yeah,
Slade, who are you taking?
I assume that's bad. That's just how I think.
So the first one that I went with was TCU at -2. I think that it's disrespectful. I think that they've shown that they are a really great team. I think, unfortunately, I think that the spread here would be like 15 points if their offensive line had any chance of being able to stand on both legs and just block the person in front of them for maybe half the plays. And then I went with Duke +7 just because I think that they're gonna be able to win that game today outright, so I think that's a good pick.
All right. For my picks, I'm going to go with UMass plus 33.5. Texas A&M has not scored 33 points in a game this season. The highest they've scored is 31, and that was against an FCS school. Listen, I understand UMass sucks, but for the fact that Texas A&M has not scored 33 points yet this year, and also I feel like that team is just quitting on Jimbo. We've seen how many kids get suspended and kicked off the team in the last few weeks and so on. I think the rest of the players there just don't really care. They're not going to a bowl game. I think they win today, but I think UMass is able to, at least score a touchdown or two and not let Texas A&M score 33 points.
I feel like it had to be a typo in Vegas or something. Like I seen that and I was like, ain't no way. And then I looked and sure enough, there was a way.
Over in the Pac-12, the Utah-Oregon game, I'm going to take over 60.5. These are both two great offenses. We saw last week, Oregon does not have a very good defense. Georgia proved it. They kind of sputtered throughout the season. And then last week, Washington just ran the ball and mostly threw the ball all over us. I think Cam Rising does the same thing, except he can run a lot better than Michael Penix. And I think Oregon is going to be able to answer a lot. So I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I could see both teams scoring in the 40s, so that's going to go way over the 60. And the last one I'm taking is Penn State minus 19. They're playing at Rutgers. It's very well documented how bad Rutgers sucks. I think Rutgers keeps it close in the first half. The second half, I think they put Drew Alar in, and then they pull away, and Penn State wins by three or four scores. So I'm going to take Penn State minus 19. So for those of you at home, make sure you take the Texas A&M minus 33.5, the Utah-Oregon under, and then Rutgers plus 19, just for your own viewing pleasure. So let's go ahead. It is time now for our game picks for week 12. We are going to start off with there's not a lot of good games this week, and so we apologize ahead of time for some of these games that we're going to pick. The first game up should be a good game. We have Duke at Pitt. This will be the noon game on the ACC network. Pitt, as we have documented well with Slade, is a 7-point favorite. The over-under is 49.5. Nick, let's start with you as always. Who are you taking in this game?
Yeah, so I ended up going with Pitt on this. I think these are two very evenly matched teams, and by that I mean mediocre. But I do think Pitt with the home field advantage ends up taking this one.
Slade?
Yeah, I'm going with Duke here. I think that they're going to be able to kind of close the season out strong. And I just think that Pitt has been kind of up and down all season. They've won their last two games, so I think that this is their week to go back down again.
I'm going to go with Pitt at home, mainly for two reasons. One, it's senior day, and we see these teams every year play a lot harder on senior day, especially when, hey, we're not in contention for the conference championship, playoffs, whatever. We're just kind of a middle-of-the-road team. Hey, it's our seniors' last time at home. Let's go out there and let's play really well for them. So I'm taking for that reason. And two, I think their rushing game is just a little bit better than Duke's. Duke has a dual-threat quarterback, but I think just overall, the offensive line and the running game for Pitt is just going to be the difference maker, as we have seen so many times this year. Next game up we have is Oklahoma State at Oklahoma, the Bedlam game. The next to last time this game will be played, unless something happens over the offseason. This will be a 7:30 game on ABC. Oklahoma is a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under is 66.5. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I went with Oklahoma in this one. It was a really tough decision for me because both of these teams, it depends on what team you're getting on any given night, on whether they're going to be really good or really bad. So I honestly am just kind of hoping for a good OU night and a bad OK State night, to be honest.
Slade?
Yeah, I think both teams are so far up and down, and I think that OU is just much better at running the ball, and I think that they're going to be able to use that to get the win today.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. One thing we didn't mention is Oklahoma is still not bowl eligible. They lost to West Virginia last week to keep them from bowl eligibility for now. I think that stays for another week. I think Oklahoma State's going to go on the road. This is one game. It doesn't matter how good or bad the teams are. This is a great rivalry game. These two always play each other really close. I'm sad this rivalry is going away, and I think with that leaving, this game as a whole has lost a lot of steam. like I said, usually even when Oklahoma or Oklahoma State is bad, this still gets a lot of hype. These two teams do not like each other at all, and I'm sad to see kind of that mystique around the game go away. But I think Oklahoma State has bounced back after a rough few weeks. I think they keep momentum going, and I think they beat Oklahoma on the road. The next game we're going to talk about is that UMass at Texas A&M game. Again, I'm sorry we did not have many games to pick from this week. This will be the noon game on ESPN Plus. As we said, Texas A&M is a 33.5 point favorite. The over/under is 47.5. I would also take that under if I'm you at home. Well, I guess I need to take the over. But Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I'm taking UMass. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going with Texas A&M. I think that there's a very good chance that they could fumble this game. However, I just think there's still too much talent on the field for Texas A&M to not, even if it's a squeak away on a last-second field goal. I think it's a game that Texas A&M should win. They're at home. UMass is obviously not very good, or Vegas wouldn't put a 30-point spread on it. But I do think that this is a lot closer than 30 points.
Slade?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be the first even matchup that Texas A&M gets this year, and so I think they're going to be able to play at that level and get like a 7 or 8 point win here.
Yeah, I'm taking Texas A&M as well. But again, just back to the fact, A&M has not scored more than 31 points in a game. That game where they scored 31 points was against an FCS school, Sam Houston State, which only has 5 wins on the year as a whole. And so those 31 points were not against a very good team, as we've seen. And as I've said, I think Texas A&M has packed it in for the year. I think a lot of those guys just don't care. Some of them are just getting playing time, show what they got so they can transfer out of there. I think it's going to be a dumpster fire to watch in the offseason with Texas A&M, all the transfers leaving and so on. We've already seen a lot of players for next season decommit and try to go somewhere else. So it's just going to be a firestorm to watch. And as a person that does not like Texas A&M, it's going to be fun for us at least. Next game up, we have Utah, number 10, visiting number 12, Oregon. Oregon coming off that tough loss last week to rival Washington. They want revenge after last season with Utah blowing them out twice. This will be 10:30 on ESPN. Utah is a 2-point favorite right now. The over/under is 60.5. Nick, who are you taking?
Yeah, so somebody had to do it, but I took Oregon. I think that, like you just said, this is a revenge game times two. Also, they're coming off, a relatively, I'll call it bad performance last week. It wasn't terrible though. The offense is going to offense. Defense just couldn't have stopped the mouse in a mousetrap. But I think they bounce back from that. They have revenge on their minds, and they're playing at home. They're going to have the crowd behind them. It's going to be 10:30 at night, so the whole stadium's going to be drunk. It's going to be a good time, good energy, good vibes, and I think Oregon pulls it out.
Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Oregon here, or I'm not Oregon, Utah. Sorry. The reason is just I think it's going to be a rough day for you, George. I think that at some point the big parlay is going to lose, and that'll be about 1 o'clock, and then you're gonna have today ending bad, and then Sunday ending bad because Oregon's gonna keep it close. They're gonna keep it a teeter-totter. They're gonna go down and score. Fourth quarter is gonna be electric. The only bad part is it's gonna be on Sunday.
Yeah. You wanted to talk about Georgia's scheduling issues earlier. I think this is a crime to have a top 15 ranked matchup at 10:30 at night on ESPN.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it is what it is. I'm going to take Utah as well, just for the simple fact that I watched that defense last week. I think Utah's offense is better than Washington. I think overall Utah's defense is better than Washington too. And so I do expect a high scoring game. But I did think the offense was. I think the offense is going to play much like they did in the first half last week through more of the game. Just struggle to move the ball at times. And I hope to God we stop going 4-4 down so much. Listen, our defense needs to make stops too. And if that doesn't happen, then yeah, we're going to need to go 4-4. But I think just from what I saw last week, I'm going to take Utah on the road. Next game up, we have Texas at Kansas. This is 3:30 on Fox Sports 1. Texas is a 9.5-point favorite. It just got bumped up this morning. The over/under is 63.5. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I'm going Kansas because it's horns down all day, every day. But I'm still, they might have let me down early in the season. But I still think it's a very good Kansas team with a lot of confidence and a lot of energy. And again, this is a Texas team. Kind of the theme today of a lot of these teams playing have been up and down. Obviously, Slade really wants them to win, but I don't think it happens in Kansas. We've seen them compete against TCU. TCU beat Texas. If you're one of those people that likes to look at things that way, Kansas, could make this a good game. So we'll find out. But go Jayhawks! I'll never say that again in my life.
It's like you say that every week that you pick them. By
Yeah,
the way.
I feel like that's the second or third time you've said that.
Yeah, but after this season, because they've already done it now, so I have no reason to hype them up after this season.
Yeah, so I'm going with Texas here. I think the reason is,
Shocking.
like I said earlier, I think that they're going to be able to squeak out a win this week, and then they're going to be able to get a win against Baylor at noon next week, and Kansas State's going to be sitting there with all the pressure on them in their 4 o'clock or 3:30 game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Texas as well. We kind of saw them really struggle last week, and previous games when they struggle one, they come out the next, and that they're able to move the ball really well, and they can showcase how good that offense could be. A lot of questions around there. Sarkisian's play calling needs to get a lot better. But at the end of the day, I think Texas just has a little bit too
Sioux
much.
game's on point though.
Yeah, whatever.
Man showed up in a Burger King outfit.
Yeah. And I told you before the game, TCU was going to give it to him his way, and they did, and they won.
Oh yeah.
And so, but I think Texas A&M just has too much for Kansas this week. Kansas is already bowl eligible, so I'm happy for them. But I think Texas wins this game on the road. Uh, they also want revenge for last season. But next game up we have is Boise State at Wyoming. This is 7 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. Boise State is a 14-point favorite. The over/under is 44.5. The key reason we picked this game is if Boise State wins, they are locked into the Mountain West Championship game. If Wyoming wins, they still are not locked in technically, but they will have the tiebreaker over Boise State if they can win next week as well. So there is a lot on the line in this game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think it's going to be closer than 14 points. But Nick, let's go ahead and get your pick.
Yeah, like you, I think this one's going to be a battle. We talk about the mountain. I think that these two teams are kind of in that conversation every year. They know what this is about. I don't know exactly what their schedules look like every year, but I'm sure this is a familiar opponent. I do think that this is going to be within a score, but I do got to take Boise State.
Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Boise State also. I think that they're just gonna have a hard time losing this game. They'd have to lose this, like they have to be the ones to go out there and really not be able to move the ball at all for them to lose this game. I think their team is just really good compared to Wyoming's.
Yeah. Normally I'd like to say weather's going to be a factor because they're playing in Wyoming. It's supposed to be like 20 degrees with wind, possible snow, but Boise State plays in Idaho, so there's no real difference maker there. I think Boise State, they struggled to get going at the beginning of the season, and then they've ripped off a couple big wins. They beat a really good Air Force team, and I think they're going to beat Wyoming on the road. But again, I have this being closer than 2 touchdowns. I can see this being a last minute touchdown kind of game, or Boise State makes a last minute stand. And so I'm going to take Boise State on the road. The next game up we have is NC State at Louisville. North Carolina State is coming off a loss to Boston College, which should automatically disqualify you from being a football team. But nonetheless, you're still here. They're still somehow ranked, which is probably the more baffling part of all this. But they are on the road to play Louisville, 3:30 p.m. ESPN Plus. Louisville is a 4-point favorite. The over/under is 45. Nick, who are you taking?
Yeah, so despite some of their struggles this season, I still got to go with NC State. I think this is going to be a great game. I like the spread on this one. I think it could be really accurate. But I just think that NC State is going to have that bounce back. I don't think that Louisville. I think if NC State had played the season the way they were expected to, these teams, everybody would think they were so much farther apart. But NC State has struggled a lot this year. Louisville has been good. But I just think that NC State, like I said, gets that rebound from last week. I'm sure they're all mad and ends up walking out of Louisville with a dub here.
Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I don't think you can lose to Boston College, so I'm going with Louisville.
Yeah. When I look at NC State's schedule, their offense just sucks. Their defense is really good, one of the top in the country. But the most points they scored all year is 55 against an FCS school. Their biggest FBS win was a 41-10 win over UConn. Other than that, they struggle to score more than 20 points in a game. I think one game outside of that, they've scored more than 20. Excuse me, two. They beat Virginia Tech 22-21, and the other one was they beat Wake 30-21. I think Louisville. I mean, Clemson just they came out there mad last week and they shut Louisville down. But I think Louisville has a bounce back game more so than North Carolina State, especially at home. And I think they're just able to score a little bit more points than NC State, which is a key in winning a football game. So I'm going to take Louisville at home in a close one. I think the 4-point spread's fair, but I'm going to take Louisville.
Booger
Next
McFarland out here.
Next game up we have is Minnesota, or excuse me, Iowa at Minnesota. This will be the 4 o'clock game on Fox. Minnesota is 2.5-point favorite. The over/under is 32.5. As we saw earlier, we know how important this game is for the possibility to play in the Big Ten championship game in 2 weeks. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I got to go with Iowa. Kind of like you had talked about a little bit earlier. I think Iowa's got a lot of momentum. The offense has looked better the past couple weeks. And when I look at Minnesota, it's kind of the opposite. They started out good, and they've kind of stumbled and fallen. Now, obviously, Tanner Morgan was out. I just think that this is an Iowa team that kind of sees themselves not necessarily in the driver's seat in the Big Ten West, but with an opportunity. And considering how poorly they've played, at least the offense have played, to sit there, at this point in the season and say we still have a chance in the Big Ten West, I think is huge for them. They know, they've all these teams kind of battle back and forth every year and, might interchange. But I feel like Iowa is typically the more consistent team out of the Big Ten West. They've been here. They know what to do. And I think they get it done on the road.
Slade?
Yeah, I went with Minnesota here. I think that Iowa's going to surprise us, and they're going to come out and score 5 points. And
Oh,
then next week we're going to see them break the record with the lowest over under again.
I could absolutely see that happening. I'm going to take Minnesota as well, though. And I think it comes down to one man and one man alone. That's Mohamed Ibrahim. I said at the beginning of the year he was a Heisman candidate. He obviously got hurt, struggled then for the middle part of the season, but since then he has kind of rebounded, especially with Tanner Morgan playing, not playing, and when he does play, he sucks. He's literally Spencer Petras 2.0, except he's just 30 years old. But I mean, these are both really good defenses. I think Nick is right. I think the under hits here. They are both allowing under 14 points a game average on the season. But I think just the run game and Mohamed Ibrahim is just going to will Minnesota to a victory at home. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. Next game we have here is Syracuse at Wake Forest. We're looking at two teams that were both at one point ranked inside the top 10. And now here they are at 6-4 both. Both going bowling, but both not having the seasons that they wanted to be having. I think Syracuse has officially returned back to a basketball school. But here we are. This game will be at 8 p.m. on the ACC network. Wake Forest is a 9-point favorite. The over-under is 57. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start out by saying I had no idea how to judge this. These are two teams, like you said, that we've seen inside the top 10, and then we've seen just completely fall apart. So kind of like, I forget which game I said it earlier, it's going to be a matter of which team we get, tonight. And I just think that with the way that they've played recently, I think Wake ends up being the better team here at 8 p.m. and they get the dub.
Slade?
Yeah, I'm going with Wake also. I think that Syracuse had a crazy start to the beginning of the season, and we've just seen the demise of that ever since. I mean, I feel like, George, we watched that Thursday or Friday night game that they played early on, and ever since then, I had rooted for them. I had them beating Clemson, and I just ran them into the ground. So I can't go for them anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you look at that Clemson game, that's a game they should have won. They were leading. But I'm going to go with Wake Forest as well, just for the simple reason of Wake Forest can play offense. It seems like Syracuse's offense has disappeared. Garrett Schrader was hurt. He missed a few weeks, and now he was back last week, and he looked worse than he did before he got injured. And obviously, we've seen Wake Forest. They hung around with UNC last week. They had a chance to win that game. And so, again, back to football basics, they're going to score more points than Syracuse, and they're going to pick up a big win. So it is time now for our Week 12 game of the week, and it's going to be a great game. That's right. Our game of the week is USC at UCLA, the battle for the victory bell. Apparently, people in college football think that USC and UCLA is a lesser rivalry than Notre Dame USC. I'm just kidding, it is. But here we are. So this game will be 8 p.m. on Fox. USC is a 2.5 point favorite. The over under is 76.5. Nick, what are you taking this week?
Yeah. So I have to go with UCLA here. I talked them up earlier. I think this could very well be a game of the year candidate. I don't think it's going to be game of the year. I think there's some good games that have already happened and some that still could happen. But it's definitely going to be a good one. 8 p.m. So you don't got to stay up till halfway to the crack of dawn to watch it. Uh, I'm looking at you, Oregon. And just think it's going to be a good game. I think that these are both two teams that have seen their highs and lows. USC has kind of stayed up there, but they've definitely shown some weaknesses. I was higher on UCLA back when they were both more competitively ranked towards each other. I thought that USC was going to fall apart. I think this is the week that they do it. I think UCLA has their number at home.
I also just want to shout out, thanks for wearing a light blue shirt, so we can barely see the logo.
Yeah. Dude, I couldn't even see the green O from Oregon earlier. I was like, how? Like,
Slade, who do you got this week?
Yeah, I'm going opposite. I think that Lincoln Riley is going to be able to get this team ready and get them the win today. I think that this is going to really push him to be cemented for one of the coaches of the year. Um, Obviously, we've seen what he was able to do to Oklahoma, and I think for him to be able to have this team even remotely where they're at year one of being at this school. I mean, obviously the transfer portal has changed so much for these teams and it has really benefited him because I mean half their team was from the transfer portal. It's really interesting to see how he's been able to go about this season. And so for that reason I think that USC is gonna get it done today.
Yeah, this is the game last year. UCLA won 62-33. Obviously, this is a very different team. UCLA also gets upset by Arizona last week at home. Again, the quiet crowd just affected them, I guess. But I think at the end of the day, um, USC wants revenge for last season. They want to continue to play at a high level to keep any possibility of a playoff appearance alive. Um, at the end of the day, though, I think UCLA was looking ahead to this week. That's why they lost. And 9 times out of 10, when you lose because you're looking ahead, you're going to lose the next week or two. So I'm going to take USC on the road. I think this is going to be a great game, though. I'm excited to see Caleb Williams and DTR showdown. I think it's going to be high scoring. That 76.5 is in danger. But I think USC just has a little bit too much for them. They lost Travis Dye last week. I don't think the run game's going to take a step back, though, but I think they're going to be playing hard for him. And so I'm going to take USC on the road. And that will do it for our game picks for week 12. That will do it for our whole show for week 12. We thank you guys very much for checking us out. Next week is going to be a lot of fun. The three of us are going to be together in person. So we are so excited to do that for Rivalry Week. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a big show planned for you guys. So make sure you guys are there, 8:30 a.m. next Saturday. We look forward to it. We're going to have a lot of fun. Make sure you subscribe and like our YouTube, and we will see you next week.
There you go.